Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About the Middle East. I'm Andy Blanche.
And I'm Juliana Musheyev, and John Dickman is here helping us today.
On this show, we talk about the Middle East. Its culture, politics, religion, art, music, just about anything that will help us understand the complexity of the region.
We hope to promote an open and honest discussion about the conflict in Israel and Palestine, and to humanize the conflict by getting to know people who have a stake in the issues. You're listening to WSLR LPFM 96.5 in Sarasota and WSLR 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton. The opinions and views expressed on Let's Talk About the Middle East are strictly those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the station manager, the board of directors, or anyone else affiliated with WSLR.
The Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee presents the Holocaust Awareness Lecture Series with Dr. Andre Krauss. The 4 lectures will be held monthly from February through May at the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee campus, 580 McIntosh Road, Sarasota. Pre-registration is required. To register, call 941-552-6304 or email jnew, that's Jnew, at jfedsarasota.org, jnew at jfedsrq.org. Sounds like a great event. Don't miss it.
Cool.
So today, I'm going to be chatting with Juliana Musheyev, my co-host, about her experience last week when she was in Washington, D.C., attending a rally and a march in support of Palestine and against AIPAC. AIPAC is the American Israel Political Action Committee. We thought this would be a great opportunity to let you hear and to engage with Juliana about what people at the front lines of this issue are thinking and what they're talking about, and also to hear what that experience was like from her own perspective. So, Juliana, to get started, why don't you tell people a little bit about the event itself, who sponsored it, where it was, where you marched to, how many people were there, just to give them a feel for what the event was all about.
Sure. So the event was co-sponsored by 2 organizations. One of them was the Answer Coalition, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. And the Answer Coalition has chapters all across the country, and this was the D.C. chapter organizing it. And the other one was Al-Auda, or the Palestinian Right to Return Coalition. We heard about the rally, me and a friend, a couple of months in advance, and we decided to fly to D.C., and we definitely weren't the only ones flying into D.C. to attend this rally. Most of the people I met weren't even from D.C. There were people there from London, New York, California, all over the country, people that are dedicated, because this is an annual rally against AIPAC that a lot of people know about and want to attend. It happens every year. In terms of what it was like, we flew in a couple of days before, and what was really cool is I got to see the back end of organizing this. Of course, there was a huge organizational effort before we got there, but a lot of the loose ends were being tied, and I was witnessing that process. And there's a lot of things to consider when you're planning a rally like this. What do you need a permit for? Where can you march? What's your contingency plan if something doesn't work out? And then just the sheer making of materials like placards, that took up a lot of the day before. Just if you can imagine a room of about 25 people with staple guns and tape, and all you can hear is like the punching of staple guns and people chatting over tape tearing, and it was a very well-oiled machine, and we churned out about like 700 placards that day. And then the next day, we all, gathered at the organizational space and then drove to near the White House, where we unloaded the signs and then carried them to right in front of the White House, laid them out in a row, and people started filtering into the protest. Of course, I can go into it. I mean, it's all very organized. So everyone had jobs to take care of to make sure everything was running smoothly. And even I had a job. I'm not even like officially part of but because I was there and they could use me, they gave me one. And it was great. So the turnout, I will estimate maybe 1,000 people showed up, which is good.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And then we marched from the White House to the Verizon Convention Center, where the AIPAC conference took place. Yeah.
So you've been involved in activism before. Had you ever been to a rally like this one? And was it different in any way from previous experiences?
Yeah, it was very different because, first of all, I've only been to one other rally outside of Sarasota. So, of course, the atmosphere is different. And it's probably the biggest one I've ever been to. Mm-hmm. And I've also never been to a rally for Palestine. The difference is because there were so many organizers committed to keeping up momentum, it was an extremely energetic rally. Uh-huh. There were just leaders sprinkled throughout the crowd, pumping people up. And so we were marching through the street. Usually I look around when I march to see people's reactions to, all these crazy people marching and yelling. But I was so absorbed in the energy of marching. The people that had their cell phones out taking pictures of us didn't really even cross my line of my radar,
It's so interesting. Do you think the fact that the rally was in Washington, D.C., the capital and the seat of so much of our foreign policy that affects this, do you think that changed the dynamic of the rally in any way? And John lived in D.C. for a number of years. Maybe he might want to comment on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course it changed it. It felt like a pivotal thing that we were doing. The fact that we were in front of the White House, one of the most visited places in Washington, D.C., the week before the cherry blossom, right? Is it the
Yes.
festival? So there were just so many people there just visiting, taking pictures, and suddenly there are all these militant, I think it's very valuable that people see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, of course, it's meaningful that it's in D.C. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything, John?
Okay, yeah.
No, one.
Just a sec. We'll get.
I didn't have John's mic up because he usually.
I just wanted to ask Juliana one really pertinent question about all the protesting and so forth, and that was, did the cherry trees looked like they were going to blossom at the right time? I mean, that's what's important in Washington if you live there.
The cherry trees were beautiful. I didn't know that was the thing that people came to Washington for. And when I came into a taxi, I was like making small talk with the driver, and I'm just like, "How's business this time of year?" And he's like, "It's going to get fast because of the cherry blossom." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I guess this is season for Washington D.C. is the cherry blossom."
It's one of the few things that happen there in Washington. It's not politically motivated. People like to just be a part of that because politics is every bit of their lives there. And I just wanted to add also that you're able to protest there without any obstacles because for many, many years people would go there and protest in front of you, and before you came, and they set the standard that was to let people like yourselves, unobstructed, to be able to voice their opinions. And it's a very wide open city.
Yeah, given that. And then I'll just say a short thing. The police did try to disperse us.
Really?
When we were outside of the White House, which is a public area that we didn't need a permit for.
Right.
And they were asking us for a permit or some proof that we were allowed to be there. There were cop cars on both sides of us, and then the person on the megaphone, I forget who it was kind of acting in the leadership position saying, we're not going anywhere. We have the right to be here. And that's really instrumental when the police is trying to disperse you, is to have someone on the microphone making people feel at ease about the fact that they don't have to move because they have the legal right to be there. But they did try to disperse us, hoping that we didn't know enough about our rights to stay put.
But they didn't know who they were dealing with.
No, they didn't know who. Yeah, they didn't.
So, Juliana, I know that one of the things you did while you were there is interview a number of the people that were participating in the protest. I've listened to a number of the clips that you brought back, and I have to say they're absolutely fascinating. Knowledgeable people with very clear ideas. I'm wondering what, from your perspective, was the most surprising thing that you learned from doing these interviews?
Yeah, the most surprising thing was seeing a group of about 10 Orthodox rabbis huddled together as part of the protests, and when I saw them, I immediately wanted to interview them, but I didn't get to until the very end of the rally, I guess because I was a little intimidated. I still have feelings from growing up about rabbis and just how, we have to be very respectful, but that was the most shocking thing to me. And the clear separation between Judaism and Zionism, that's really meaningful to me because I have a strong connection to my Judaism through my family. And for a while, I felt like I had to defect from it to be part of this movement. Just seeing the rabbis there and other Jews was really meaningful because you don't have to be a Zionist to be a Jew, to be a good Jew, So that was probably the most surprising and meaningful thing.
Can I ask a real quick question?
Sure.
And maybe there's plenty of people out there listening that might be wondering the same thing. Could you briefly tell me what's the difference between Judaism and Zionism? Just briefly?
Yeah, and actually, I had brought a clip that might help explain it. Maybe we could play the clip, and then I can comment on if there's any incomplete. I'll play the clip right now. This is from Rabbi David Feldman from an organization called Neturei Karta, or Orthodox Jews Against Zionism.
I'm out here to protest the disproportionate.
I'm very sorry. This is the wrong clip. Here is the right clip.
AIPAC does not represent American Jewry. They don't represent world Jewry. The state of Israel is in total violation of Jewish law. It's against basics of Jewish belief. According to Judaism, Jews are forbidden to create a sovereign homeland for themselves. This philosophy of Zionism was not invented by religious scholars. This is a total secular movement founded by heretic people from Jewish descent and was opposed by the entire Jewish community at the very beginning and still is. You would find some people that for one reason or another would to a certain extent support the state of Israel. If you would find a religious person supporting the state of Israel, it does not make the state of Israel religious. If you would find a religious person, God forbid, stealing, does does not make theft religious. Unfortunately, when this AIPAC is speaking in my name, when the State of Israel is acting in the name supposedly of the entire Jewish people, we stand up and we say no. This is in total violation of Jewish teachings. This is total violation of any human rights or moral values or international law. And this has to be condemned, and we do stand up and we condemn it. And we say, we pray constantly for the peaceful and speedy dismantlement of this State of Israel.
Yes. So one of the things he said in that interview is, just because you're a Jew supporting the State of Israel doesn't make the State of Israel religious. Just like if you're religious and you steal doesn't make stealing religious. So I thought that was a perspective that I've never been exposed to in my life. Coming from an Orthodox Jew saying that not only is this wrong, it's against our religious values. So that was very interesting.
I really thought it was fascinating also, the question that he asked about the actions of Israel potentially being in conflict with Torah, which is a pretty interesting and important question that maybe we're going to want to do another show where we can really drill down on the conflict or the differences between Zionism and Judaism. I will say that there are more religious Jews in Israel who take this perspective than people realize. I personally had worked very, very closely with a rabbi who was the rabbi of one of the settlements. Tekoa is the name of the settlement. His name was Rabbi Menachem Fruman, and he was fascinating. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. Lovely man. But he would say he loved living in Tekoa, but he said he doesn't care whether it was Israel or Palestine. He would have been perfectly happy, and he said this over and over again, to be living in the state of Palestine, because his relationship with the land we call Israel, had to do with his relationship with God and Torah. It had nothing to do with the state of Israel. So from his perspective, the state of Israel was a man-made creation that had nothing to do with him, where he lived, or how he lived. And there really are more people in that kind of questioning category than folks may realize.
And I'll say one more thing about this rabbi. Oh, well, first of all, he agreed to be on the show.
Yay.
So if we do want to kind of flesh out that difference, but also there were two people. We were on the front lines of the convention center, so people were coming in, and we could, if we outstretched our arms, could probably touch them, although we would probably get detained or something. But they were right there at the rails, the rabbis, and there were two, Jewish men who were coming into the AIPAC Convention Center and then saw these rabbis and sort of stepped out of the ramp to go talk to him. And for a while, David Feldman, the rabbi, was talking to these two convention goers, and they had a long conversation that I couldn't hear most of. I was kind of lingering, trying to get my interview in after their conversation. But he seemed to have convinced them of his point, which was kind of cool. They shook hands and hugged afterwards, so it was a really interesting moment.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that you were standing very close to the convention center where the AIPAC group was actually meeting, and that there were huge numbers of supporters there. What was that like, protesting against a big crowd like that? And did your interviews give you any particular insight into why people feel so strongly about AIPAC?
Yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable being so close to AIPAC convention goers, because I know people who would go to that convention, and they're young people, they're older people, they're people like, and we're kind of yelling, shame on you, shame on you, shame on them. But at the same time, it was just so confrontational. It was but it was great. It was great to have that confrontation. And the more I spoke to people at the protest, the more I understood really how harmful AIPAC is. I'll play a clip of a woman that I interviewed. She was holding a sign that said, "Thou shalt not steal thy neighbor's land." I came up to her asking her for an interview, and she asked me for my press credentials. So I gave her my WSLR business card. But here
You're
you go.
official.
Yeah. I'll play it right now.
I'm out here to protest the disproportionate influence that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee has on U.S. foreign policy. I think that they have a strangely powerful, disproportionately powerful influence on our congressmen, so that our congressmen actually are not able to respond to the needs of the American people. We have lead in children's public schools here. We're shutting down schools in this country. We have bridges and infrastructure falling apart. We have people who are not able to get health care. And yet we have no problem giving $3.5 billion of American taxpayers' money to a small foreign country that actually is doing quite well economically and is prospering. So I'm here also to protest the fact that much of that money goes to maintain an illegal occupation and dispossession of the Palestinian people. And I think that we could better use those tax dollars here at home. And I also lament the fact that with this disproportionate military force that all this tax dollars gives to Israel, that this discourages Israel from really sitting down with their Palestinian neighbors and negotiating in good faith. One side is the fourth largest army in the world. The other side legitimately tries to resist with whatever they can, primitive rockets or whatever. And as we know, 2 children were just killed by Israeli rockets or actually drone strikes, I believe, in retaliation for primitive rockets that landed on fallow ground and didn't hurt anyone. So if we want to end this cycle, I think really you have to level the playing field.
So that's another topic, a big topic, the role of U.S. tax dollars in the situation. I'm hoping maybe we could do a whole show focusing on that issue at some point.
Yeah, that would be great, because when you really think about, I asked a lot of people in Answer Coalition when I was interviewing them why this is such an important issue for Answer, because they really have put a lot of focus into it. And I think the fact that the U.S. involvement is driving this occupation is a big deal. There are other things that are important about Palestine, as sort of, they see Israel as a stronghold for Western imperialism in the Middle East. They're colonizers, and Palestinians are, the oppressed peoples that are victims of colonization at the hands of the U.S. government as well as the Israeli government, because the U.S. is helping with that. So that really, they're a symbol of resistance against colonization. And also, resources are being deflected from schools, from infrastructure here in the U.S. So, that's pretty good reason to focus on this issue, I think.
We'll do a show soon.
Yeah. These are just teasers for shows. They really are, yeah.
So, Juliana, I know from listening to a variety of the tapes that you interviewed a whole range of individuals, men and women, some people who grew up in Israel, others who grew up in Palestine, some from the United States, some were religious, some weren't religious, really a whole range of different folks. Was there anything at all that these people seemed to agree on?
Yes. One of the questions that I tried to ask everyone that I interviewed was, what is the solution to the conflict? And unanimously, everyone said that we need a one-state solution where there's Palestinian liberation and the right to return. So the millions of refugees that have been driven out of their homes can return to their homes. And they also said a state where Jews, Christians, and Muslims, every religion, can live in harmony, democratically, equal rights for all, and from what they say, from the river to the sea, for Palestine to be free. And that, I also followed up asking, should Jews be scared or but people agreed it's not about, getting the Jews to leave. It's about just making a nation that is truly democratic where everyone is equal. And I actually have a clip from someone sort of explaining that. It's a pretty short clip here. I'll play it right now. 1 second here. And
So, as a Palestinian, I think that we should have sovereignty and the right to kind of govern ourselves, to live free of borders and checkpoints and just constant trouble and occupation of our land. And I think ultimately it would be great if all refugees all over the world, all over the borders of Lebanon and Syria and everywhere else could return to their homes in Palestine. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was Iman Kalik. She's a Palestinian organizer with the Answer Coalition. And it was really interesting talking to her. Our interview was much longer than that, but she was one of the people who was instrumental in organizing the rally.
So do you think we have time to play the last clip? I know that you found it interesting talking to people who actually grew up in the occupied territories. Do we have time for a quick clip on that one?
Yeah, I think so. Another thing that I tried to do was actually talk to Palestinians. There were a lot of Palestinians there, and this is a clip from a man named Aman. I should have been more prepared with these names, and I'll expand on each of these interviews in later shows, but here's the clip right now.
Are you Palestinian?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm American Palestinian. I was born here.
Okay. Do you have any family in Palestine?
Yeah. I still have family in Palestine, yeah.
What are their lives like?
Their lives are, the labs, when they test mice in little plastic cages and stuff, that's their life. They live under occupation. Everything is limited. Everything goes through occupation. Entering, exiting, the water, how much water they get a day, how much electric they get a day, if they're allowed to have a permit, if they're allowed to even to their own resources, like making their own water from God's water, or even their plants, even the simplest things, the occupation is involved. Where they go to school, how they go to school, if they have a social life or not because of the apartheid wall, if they could see their brother on the other side of Kalkilia, for example. So the occupation 100% runs their life and runs it as they are in prison. Yes, they're not besieged like the Gaza Strip, but they are the same kind of thing, except they have their policeman, which is the PA, doing the dirty job for them.
We are definitely going to have some Palestinians on this show soon to expand on that. Totally interesting. But to wrap us up, we're almost out of time, Juliana. I know that after the march and rally were over, you stayed on in D.C. and went with me to spend a day lobbying on the Hill in support of peace efforts. I'm wondering what it was like for you to go from protesting to working inside the system like that.
It was really surreal because there was not that much time in between those things, and it's really like the difference between working outside of the system and working within the system to make change. I think both of the elements are really important. I feel like both of the things I did were very, very important. But the people were different. Their ideology was different. The way their approaches were definitely different. There was someone in our lobbying group who worked for an organization called One Voice in Gaza that strongly advocates for a two-state solution, and they're a Gazan. They're from Gaza. I don't know if Gazan is the right way to say it, but and they recruit students to advocate for it, and he finds it very challenging to do that. And I know we have to wrap it up, so I'll cue the ending music now, I guess, right?
Well, first, before we go to the music, is there a way for people to find out about the Answer Coalition and the other group?
So really quick, you can go to answercoalition.org, or to find out about the Palestinian right to return, you can go to alawda.org, al-awda.org. And we're going to be wrapping it up.
Thank you so much, Juliana. This was fascinating. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next show. And if you have time on Sunday, the 17th, the next